One day in 1987, a 1.72-meter-long gold waistband was found in the Shangshuan and Sichuan waters of the northern South China Sea. Soon, archaeologists discovered an ancient shipwreck, nearly 30 meters deep in the sea. The shipwreck was named Nanhai One. The experts' first investigation was that Nanhai One belonged to the Songyuan period. This means that its sinking from the world above has a longer history than many dynasties. In 2007, China pioneered a world-first technique to salvage Nanhai One in its entirety, and housed it in the museum specially built for it. As the world's oldest ocean-going trade merchant ship with the largest hull and the best-preserved structure ever unearthed, this underwater relic was unprecedented, generously informative about the maritime trade history of the Song Dynasty. It turns those ancient documents' records into tangible physical evidence. In 2014, the excavation and conservation of Nanhai One were fully carried out and are still ongoing. Over a decade has passed. We'll witness its abundant exclusive footage and follow the archaeologists to uncover its mysterious history for the first time. Which period of reign was this ship made? What kind of people were on board? What kind of cargo did it have? Where did it set out? Where was it bound for? And why did it end up deep down in the sea? All these questions will have their answers. While the Nanhai One excavation was being unfolded, a central question rose to the public's attention. Since it had been thought to be a Songyuan period ship, to which exact period did it belong? Archaeologists and the experts from the Archaeological Science Lab extracted 3 typical categories of samples for carbon-14 dating. The first sample to test was from the primary structural part in shipbuilding.
We took a full set of timber samples from the shipwreck. One is the keel, the other the mast partner. They are likely to be linked to the ship's building date. Few have focused on these before. What they were concerned with was limited to the date when a ship sank.
The result of the hull sample test indicated that the keel of Nanhai One's hull was built in AD 900 to 1000 of the Northern Song period. The keel and masts, as the central structure of a ship, once made, were put to use till the end. That means perhaps Nanhai One had been built and launched early in the Northern Song. After its voyage life began, it was constantly being repaired and going on with voyages till the day of sinking. The other 2 categories were animal remains and annual herbaceous plants, which were only bought and brought aboard before the sale. These bones and remains were from the last voyage of Nanhai One. The test results put them between 1183 and 1215. An older ship carrying newer goods offered clues for the final days of the vessel.
The range from 1183 to 1215 should be the most likely date of that ship's sinking. Carbon-14 dating is the most accurate of all the methods. So it's no later than 1215, not including 1216.
Here at the worksite of Nanhai One, a new discovery was made. For brown glazed jars stamped with dating marks. 7th year of Chuanxi reign, 10th year of Chuanxi reign, official depot of Qiandao reign, and Bingzi year. These might have served as daily vessels for the crew. They were carried on board successively from 1156 to 1183. The sinking date of Nanhai One can't be earlier than the latest date on the jars, 1183. This also corroborated the carbon-14 dating for the ship's sinking date. By this point, the archaeologists have narrowed down the ship's final days to a range of mere decades. Their next goal was to find any clue to a more exact date. Then this day came, when a Derhua kiln bluish-white glazed two-lug jar was uncovered.
I remember we'd cleared most of the cabins. We were working on cabin 10. We suddenly found one with a Gue Mao, a dated one. It wrote, Zhang Jin's Gold Workshop, cyclical Gue Mao year. It was bright and new when unearthed.
The cyclical Gue Mao year of the Southern Song fell on two dates: the 10th year of Chuanxi reign and the 3rd year of Chuanyu reign. With the carbon-14 test results and the dated jars, the conclusion becomes unquestionable. This inky cyclical Gue Mao year was the 10th year of Chuanxi reign, that is 1183.
Why could this piece with a Gue Mao make us so excited? The inky writing means these were closest to the date when the ship sank. When this batch was carried on board for trading abroad, they were required to write the owners of the items to mark their information at the time.
The copper coins unearthed from the ship further confirmed this conclusion. These coins span several centuries and multiple dynasties. The Han Dynasty Wuzhou cash coin was the earliest, while the latest was the Chuanxi reign Yuanbao coin minted between 1174 and 1189. Before Nanhai One was fully recovered, scattered copper coins had already been found around it. It was hard to determine whether all of the coins on board had been recovered. To be precise, they finally confirmed Nanhai One's sinking date as no earlier than AD 1183. It was the 10th year of Chuanxi reign of the Southern Song. Central Asia was thrown into turmoil by war. Along the traditional Silk Road, the camel caravans grew fewer. The Southern Song dynasty, in distress, with ships far ahead of their time, sold goods overseas. The maritime trade network spanning the Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, and Red Sea became a new bridge for trade and cultural exchange between East and West. It also ushered in a golden age of maritime commerce before the Age of Discovery. When Nanhai One was salvaged in its entirety, it offered the world a relatively complete archaeological record of the Southern Song maritime trade. In Chinese history, the Song was the first dynasty that allowed and encouraged overseas trade. So how were those Song people heading abroad organized on a ship? The archaeologists were finding the answer.
Here it reads Cai and Huijiang, Tai Huijiang. There's also Zhengjika, and this is Gung, Gungshou.
In the cabins, several brown glazed jars bearing gung were unearthed, likely used by the crew. In the Song dynasty, Gungshou was a sea ship's captain, who was in charge of everything on the ship. These brown glazed jars were likely to belong to the Gungshou of Nanhai One. Some other unearthed daily wares clearly bear the written inscription, Zhengjika. During the Song dynasty, a zhikur was an administrator within an organization. This crewman surnamed Zheng may have held an important position aboard Nanhai One. Then more pottery came to light, inscribed with the word Sai Hua Zhangzha. The Huazhang was the officer responsible for navigation. Some of these key positions appear in the only surviving official trade permit issued to Lichong, a Gungshou, in the Song Dynasty. That very permit also provides clues to how crews were organized at the time.
Look how well the character for Zhang is written. 3 characters and 1 signature. Could this Bao Zhang have represented the sailors back then? Figures like Li Baozhang, Kutojia, and others, could they represent a maritime trading group led by the Baozhang? Was there perhaps a connection to the Song Dynasty's Baojia system?
The system was established in the Song Dynasty, with the household as its basic unit. 10 households formed a jia, headed by a jiazhang. 10 jia formed a bao, headed by a baozhang. It was used to administer registration, security, and taxation. Li Chung's maritime trade permit clearly demonstrates this system.
Li Chung's maritime trade permit mentions the first jia, second jia, third jia. This reflects that maritime trade also depended on the support of the southern Songs, inland administration, and institutions. Archaeological proof fits perfectly with the historical records.
It was almost a miniature society. On the ship Nanhai One, the Gungshou oversaw every aspect of the voyage, while the crew was organized under the Baojia system. As they prepared to set sail, what cargo did they carry? And where were they bound? This is the hardest exhibit to keep clean, at the Maritime Silk Road Museum. Its display case is covered with fingerprints, left behind by awestruck visitors.
They're the real artifacts.
That's incredible.
Here are displayed the most dazzling artifacts recovered from Nanhai One. Gold objects. One day in 2014, a jar-shaped container found near the ship's bow was opened. A flash of gold, hidden for centuries, came into view. After an entire morning of cleaning and cataloging, more than 70 gold artifacts, including gold leaves and ornaments, were recovered one by one. This was the first time so many gold artifacts had been found on Nanhai One. More gold artifacts were uncovered. More than 300 have been recovered. Gold leaves make up one of the largest categories. In overseas trade during the Song Dynasty, gold and silver were both currency and commodities. These gold leaves were made of pure gold, as thin as paper and shaped like book pages. Each weighed about 40 grams, roughly 1 tael in the Song Dynasty. Their front sides bear stamps reading Han Selang Liu Lang Pu, Han Mansion, and Tenfin Gold. Each was folded from 5 ultra-thin layers of gold foil. Besides the gold leaves, large quantities of silver ingots were found on Nanhai One, totaling over 300 kilograms. Many were stamped 25 taels. One 25-tael silver ingot bears the inscriptions Hangsa Erlang and Banan Jiedong.
When I was studying Southern Song bullion, the moment these gold leaves turned up, I was genuinely astonished. The place names stamped on them were all place names in Hangzhou. We had found pieces from the same goldsmith shop, but never in such large numbers.
Zhejiang Provincial Museum houses the finest Southern Song gold and silver currency. The inscriptions and stamps on the bullion recovered from Nanhai One match those on pieces in the museum's collection. The names of people and places from 8 centuries ago add vivid color to the Hangzhou in the eyes of Li Xiaoping, a Southern Song currency scholar.
This map comes from Lin Ang Gazetteer of Xianchuan reign. It shows the capital of the Southern Song. This is the Imperial Street. Along this stretch, about a kilometer long, over 100 shops dealt in gold, silver, salt certificates. Whether it's the gold leaves or the silver ingots. From Nanhai One, they all bear the words Banan Jedong. It means south of Ba, on the east side of the street.
Hundreds of years later, the archaeological remains beneath our feet still keep what this imperial street looked like. 8 centuries ago, perhaps it was right here, that the captain and merchants of Nanhai One exchanged gold and silver before setting sail.
The building stood right over there. Buildings lined both sides of the street, so it was right here. And on Nanhai One, there were also inscriptions such as Han Wulong, Han Salong, and other inscriptions. They were all in this area, basically. They were concentrated here.
According to A Dream of Sorghum, a Southern songbook, Lin An, the Southern Song capital, was also one of the world's financial centers. Vast amounts of wealth flowed through hundreds of gold and silver exchange houses. Today all the cargo on Nanhai One, intended for overseas trade, has now been fully catalogued. The 8 major categories, including gold, silver, and porcelain, closely match the records in the Song history. Most of these goods can be traced to their place of origin. As for the over 100 tons of iron aboard, experts conjecture it came from Fujian, the Southern Song's iron-making center. If we plot their origins on a map, a trade network, stretching across 3 provinces from north to south, gradually comes into view. This is a panorama of Nanhai One, fully loaded with cargo. Its 14 compartments were packed with every kind of cargo. This was likely how it looked before setting sail. So what would a cargo like this be worth in the Song Dynasty?
My first trip to Hailing Island, my first time visiting Yangzheng. Just like Nanhai One, it's also my first time meeting it. I just want to explore. What kind of exported items were on this ship? And what the main products in overseas trade were.
This was the first time for Professor Cheng Minqing to enter the Maritime Silk Road Museum and to see how Nanhai One looks. Decades of studies of the Southern Song economy have given him an acute sense. The truth lies no less in where every coin went than in what politicians and heroes did.
I've studied the Southern Song economy for over 30 years. Today is my first time seeing a living purse in the Song Dynasty trade. I see its costs, profits, and state policies. We can't calculate one by one, Do it as a whole. Like iron pots, porcelain, you can't do it singly. That won't work. You need to convert them to an average price.
A median value.
Estimating the value of this ship's cargo has long been his ambition. For Cheng Minxing, it's the clearest way to understand the scale of the Southern Song's maritime trade economy.
Look, it says here, an ordinary everyday porcelain piece. Costs 31. How many pieces do we have?
About 180,000.
Sure?
Right.
It's easy now. Multiply that number by 30.
5.4 million.
Divide it by 1,000.
1,000.
That's 5,400 guan.
Then we have 87.5 taels of gold. 35 guan make a tael. Multiply it by 35. 3,062.5. 120 tons of ironware.
120 tons?
Yes.
First year of Qiandao, the emperor was Xiaozong. It was 131 per gene. Tens, hundreds, thousands, 62,000 guan.
After repeated calculations, Cheng Minxing estimated the value of the ship's major categories of cargo at about 100,000 guan.
100,000. How do we understand this sum? It could buy 10 luxury residences, the kind owned by a chief minister. Or, if you were in Fujian, you could buy more than 3,300 mu of farmland. You could use it to build 10 large seagoing ships.
Among all the cargo, the most remarkable was the more than 120 tons of ironware. It consisted mainly of cast iron pots and thousands of wrought iron billets.
I didn't expect there was so much ironware. Worth studying. Worth it for sure. Ironware wasn't allowed to be exported, right? So this had to be smuggling, a very serious crime.
Under the Song's law, ironware could not be exported. Such a massive quantity could never have passed an official inspection. So how did they load Nanhai One? The ship was recovered intact, so we can see how the cargo aboard Nanhai One was loaded. Porcelain filled the lower cargo holds, while more than 120 tons of ironware was stacked on top. This arrangement may corroborate the records in drafts of a worthless brush, describing the smuggling of overseas cargo. After officials at the Maritime Trade Office cleared Nanhai One and allowed it to leave the port, several boats approached dozens of li offshore. Over 100 tons of ironware were quietly loaded onto the deck and piled on the declared porcelain cargo. But loading the ship this way greatly raised its center of gravity, making it more likely to capsize in rough seas. After excavating several Song and Yuan dynasty shipwrecks, underwater archaeologist Sui Yong found that Nanhai One's cargo composition and loading arrangement were not unique. If smuggling wasn't involved on every voyage, what were the reasons behind this loading method that brought navigational risks? He hoped he could find a sensible explanation.
When ironware and porcelain are loaded together, the priority is minimizing breakage. Let's do a simple experiment. We'll load it the way Nanhai One was, with porcelain below and ironware above, and see whether the rolling period becomes longer. Then we'll reverse the arrangement and see if the period gets shorter. Good. Rolling about the keel is a ship's most common oscillation. The keel is the axis. The closer an object is to that axis, the smaller its amplitude of oscillation. The farther away it is, the greater the radius, and the greater the oscillation. Porcelain is fragile. Keep it closer to the axis, and it moves less. So less is damaged. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. And then, we put the ironware down. To the bottom. That lowers the center of gravity. Okay, let's rock it again. In theory, with the center of gravity lower, the rolling period should be shorter. It's like a metronome used when you play the piano. If you move the weight upward, higher up, and the beat slows. Tick, 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 tick. When you move the weight very down. And it obviously speeds up. Tick, 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 tick. The rhythm follows the beat. It's the same pendulum principle. Today's experiment was a success. Nanhai One's loading arrangement reduced the breakage rate. It reflects the practical wisdom of ancient China.
Although this loading method minimized damage to the porcelain, a sudden change in sea conditions could greatly increase the risk. Whether it was for smuggling or to protect the porcelain, Nanhai One's high center of gravity loading arrangement remains an open question. Perhaps one day in the future, new research and discoveries will finally solve this mystery. Under the Southern Song's official maritime trade system, where would a merchant ship carrying such valuable cargo set sail from? And what procedures did it have to follow before setting sail? During the Songyuan era, Chuanzhou Port, also called Zayton Port, was renowned as the largest port in the East. The answers to those questions might be hidden in this city. The Jur Mountain in Chuanzhou was where Hu Jiechi once spent his childhood. After growing up, he learned that the cliff inscriptions recorded the ancient ritual held here to pray for favorable winds before ships set sail. With decades of guarding and researching, Hu Jiechi knows better than anyone the stone inscriptions on the mountain. These stone inscriptions were mostly left after November. Winter had fallen in the southeast coast area. The northern winds were strong. Among other things, the inscription of the 10th year of Chuanxi reign intrigues Hu Jiechi most. It may preserve the date of Nanhai One's final voyage. It lets us feel the winds that blew more than 800 years ago.
It tells us the dynasty and the year 1183. Sima Ji, the prefect of Chuanzhou, Royal Affairs Commissioner Zhao Zitao, and Superintendent of Maritime Trade Lin Shao, presided over a ceremony before Yanfu Temple's Tongyuan Shanli and Guangfu deities, the region's earliest sea gods.
Strong winds provide power for seagoing ships. Yet the towering waves they bring also make every voyage unpredictable. It was a ceremony seeking favorable winds and safe passage. The story behind the inscriptions thus gains a powerful sense of fate. The Southern Song Court's emphasis on overseas trade turned such ceremonies into official events, organized by the Maritime Trade Office, before ships set sail. Superintendent of Maritime Trade, Lin Shao, was an official of the Chuanzhou Maritime Trade Office. The Maritime Trade Office was responsible for overseeing overseas trade in ancient China. Like present-day customs, only ports with a Maritime Trade Office could clear merchant ships for overseas trade. The most important ones in the Southern Song included those overseeing trade with Korea and Japan, Maritime Trade Offices of Hangzhou and Mingzhou, as well as those responsible for trade across the South China Sea, Quanzhou and Guangzhou. Quanzhou's Liqing district has the only known Song Dynasty maritime trade office site. The Song's law required inspection of ships for overseas trade by the Maritime Trade Office before departure. After the ships returned, they must report and tax to the same Maritime Trade Office. About 10% of the cargo's value was turned over. It's called Chojia. The wealth it generated accounted for over 15% of the Southern Song government's annual revenue at its peak. It is likely that Nanhai One underwent an inspection here before setting sail. Had it not sunk, where would this voyage have taken it? In the upper layers of the Nanhai One wreck, archaeologists gradually uncovered fragments of copper objects. They then began finding a series of bronze weights. Though it couldn't be fully reconstructed, it appears to be a balanced scale. A few years later, in the silt outside the hull, archaeologists happened to uncover an empty, weathered wooden box. Footage from the excavation offered a clue for a scholar thousands of miles away.
I found several balance scales here, and more importantly, the weights, and the box that held the scale and weights. Especially the box, its interior design is extremely similar to what we found on Nanhai One, even to the size.
At the Museum of Islamic Art in Egypt, the doctor of archaeology Zhang Yekuan, driven by his curiosity about where the cargo of Nanhai One went, came here in search of answers. Balance scales like these are on display in many museums across Egypt. The Arab world may have been the origin of the scales found on Nanhai One. At the southwestern tip of the Arabian Peninsula lies Al-Sarian port, near Mecca. From the 9th to the 13th centuries, it flourished as a center of maritime trade, before declining after the 15th century. Ever since 2018, Chinese archaeologists and their Saudi counterparts have carried out joint excavations at the site. The Chinese team leader Yang Rui, who once worked on the excavation of Nanhai One, discovered a familiar object in the layers at Al-Sarian port.
I worked on the Nanhai One excavation. The moment I found this weight at Al-Sarian, I knew it was the same as the one from Nanhai One.
Separated by thousands of miles, the discovery of an identical weight inspired this young researcher to trace how they were once used.
These weights came in different sizes. The heaviest, 78 grams. Some are around 39 grams. Half that weight. And even half again, at about 20 grams. I guess they were used in overseas trade to weigh gold leaf, silver, or valuable spices.
As the documents recorded, ships of the Song Dynasty could set out from Quanzhou or Guangzhou, sail along the coasts of Southeast Asia, pass through the Strait of Malacca into the Indian Ocean, reach the Arab world and even the east coast of Africa. This course, with a length of 15,000 kilometers, is the longest course for overseas trade in Chinese history. The two balance scales, possibly from the Arab world, also point to a Red Sea port as a possible destination of Nanhai One. After clearing customs in Quanzhou, Nanhai One had two possible routes. One was to sail directly to Southeast Asia. The other followed China's coastline, to Guangdong before continuing south. Based on where it finally sank, Nanhai One took the second route. Why did they choose this route? This is Sun Yat-sen University. In a lab, a sample from Nanhai One is being tested.
By analyzing the types of fungi, we found that the dominant group was yeast. Yeast doesn't naturally occur in large quantities on the seabed, and yeast itself is one of the primary microorganisms used in fermenting rice wine. While in distilled spirits, there is no yeast. So, according to this sample, there might be rice wine on Nanhai One.
On the right side of cabin 9 and the left side of cabin 10, there were large jars that were simple in design, but quite sizable, at least over 200. Some jars bear inscriptions, like wine jar and Yuyechuan. Residue was found inside one of them, from which the rice wine sample was obtained.
I compared the pottery shards, their glaze, the clay body, and especially the decorated shards, with stamped patterns. Before making the comparison, I had no idea what I'd find. It turned out that many jars on Nanhai One matched the characteristics of ceramics from the Nanhai kilns exactly. Is this a character? Looks like one.
A pattern? It's a character.
This stamp is very similar to the one found on Nanhai One.
The site of the Nanhai kilns in Foshan. More than 200 pots on Nanhai One came from here. These pottery pots required such a simple craft that almost every kiln can make them. They were generally made to hold local products. In the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore, artifacts salvaged from the Tang Dynasty Arab shipwreck, Batu Hitam, are on display. Large jars from the Nanhai kilns are among them. They are archaeologically termed Kwangtung jars. They are often found in the countries along the Maritime Silk Route and at many shipwreck sites. The Lianma village of Guangzhou City is home to Hakka families who still make rice wine using traditional methods. Their techniques have remained unchanged. What they make is exactly rice wine.
Look at my wine. Good fermentation.
The ingredients of the rice wine closely match the residue found in the Kwangtung jars on Nanhai One.
Mr. Chen, have you ever measured its alcohol content?
About 9 to 10%.
9%.
During the Southern Song, alcohol was a state monopoly in most regions. But Guangdong was a rare exception. These Kwangtung jars filled with local rice wine might have been a unique commodity traded along the maritime Silk Route, in spite of scant historical records. They may even explain why Nanhai One sailed south to Guangdong.
What a big goose, yellow-maned goose. Remove as much meat as you can, and don't break the bones. We need a complete skeleton.
This archaeologist is Zhao Feng. He's using this goose skeleton as a reference to reconstruct the goose remains, unearthed from Nanhai One.
All right, thank you. Clavicle. Rib. This is a limb bone. This one belongs to the right wing of the goose. And this one should go right here. Same. With this specimen we can't go wrong. We extracted DNA from the Nanhai One goose and compared it with over 30 goose breeds. The results showed it was most similar to Guangdong's yellow-maned and black-maned geese.
Zhao Feng experienced the whole excavation of Nanhai One.
So these are our logbooks covering the work from 2014 through its completion in 2023. On November 11, 2019, we found the goose skeleton inside one of those bamboo baskets. Back then, we simply logged it as poultry bones.
In and out of Nanhai One's cabins, the archaeologists found a lot of flora and fauna remains. Bones of sheep, pigs, geese, etc. were scattered everywhere. Nuts, plums, sweetmeats, olives, and other plant remains were still recognizable. This is another dimension of Nanhai One. Apart from currencies and goods, we can also see their daily life over the sea.
The livestock could provide them with fresh protein. Sweetmeats, such as plum ones, provided rich vitamins for sailors and served as an important defense against scurvy. They also carried nuts on board, which are rich in healthy fats and vitamins. They are easily kept during long voyages and are an excellent source of energy. Ordinary as they may seem, they embody the accumulated experience of generations of sailors and captains, and their wisdom for surviving on the sea.
In addition, fragments of wooden combs were also unearthed, along with a jade statue of the Suzhou monk, arhat figures, prayer beads, inkstones, and more. Through them, we can picture everyday life at sea 800 years ago. Even in the middle of the ocean, people still kept order and dignity in their daily lives. Xu Ruanlin is a marine biologist at Sun Yat-sen University. One November morning, at Yangjiang's Japa fishing port, he searched for moon snails, caught by fishermen off Yangjiang.
Hey, young man, got any moon snails?
Right here. Here, take a look.
Within the concretions on Nanhai One, Archaeologists discovered numerous moon snail larvae, each 0.5 to 0.8 centimeters in length. Their shells were paper-thin. They were firmly embedded in the ship's concretions, indicating they had just completed early development when the ship sank. For Xu Ruanlin, they are the key to unraveling this historical mystery.
The moon snail's life cycle begins with spawning each September. It takes about 2 months to reach a shell length of 0.5 to 0.8 centimeters. On account of that, we estimate that the ship sank around November or early December.
After comparison, he found the moon snail specimens from Nanhai One were nearly identical in size to those he had just bought, and basically matched published records as well.
Snails, especially juvenile moon snails, have an extremely low tolerance for toxic metals, generally speaking. Even trace amounts can kill them. Concretions. These are metal concretions. So we conjecture these young moon snails were probably killed by toxic metal compounds released from the concretions not long after Nanhai One sank into the sea.
Today, the Nanhai One presented before us remains a basically intact structure. What caused its sinking was not reefs but most likely a storm or huge waves in its voyage. And its loading of high-gravity cargo made it more fragile in storms, so that it came to be devoured by the ocean. The Chuanshan Archipelago lies off central Guangdong along the main westbound sea route. It consists of Shangchuan, Xiachuan, and some other smaller islands. It's been a vital port since ancient times. For generations, local sailors have spoken of these waters with deep respect and caution. A sacrificial ritual is a must for a safe voyage. This is where Nanhai One made its final stop. Here, a vivid chapter of the Southern Song was quietly sealed away and preserved for centuries. Through this ship, we have, for the first time, systematically uncovered the maritime Silk Roads, production, trade, administration, life aboard, and artistic and technological achievements. This very ancient ship has awakened more than 800 years of history, bringing it back into our world.